Good morning, Kezia. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you, Stephanie?
I'm really good, thanks. Thanks for joining me, everybody. This is Kezia Okafor, and she is the infertility counsellor. And I've been following Kezia for some time now on Instagram because I absolutely love her approach to what she does. I'm all about mindset, as any of my followers know, and Kezia does a lot about mindset, and I love that. Also, you have a bit of fun with what you do, and I love that too. Your reels are great. So Kezia has had two really amazing pieces of news this year. So the first one that I heard about was her book. I'm always in awe, Kezia, of people who write books, and I've got a book inside me somewhere. No, the people who actually do it, I'm like, come on, that's amazing. It's brave, it's hard work and it's brave.
Yeah.
So you got the book, and then
I've got a book.
After a long time of trying, because you really can empathize with your clients.
Yes.
You finally got that positive test.
Yes, I did. I have finally got my own positive test after many long years.
Yeah.
So it's been an amazing year, and I'm so I'm so grateful. I'm so grateful. Yeah.
But all the work went into it. So I mean, grateful, lots of lovely things, but wow, the foundation work you put in there.
Lots of work and I think that's what people don't understand, that the self-work is a huge part of it. And I don't think there's one thing, I think there's so many things, and you have to kind of go through this almost journey, and you don't really know where it's going to go or where it's going to lead, and maybe that's the beauty of it.
Are you I have to say to people that I'm a different mom than I would have been because of my fertility journey. Do you find your fertility journey has changed you hugely?
Oh, it's changed me massively. So I have a son, and he's 8, but during my fertility, we went through secondary fertility. We struggled to have a second baby. And during that time, so I went through lots of fertility treatment, lots of things like that. And then, so I retrained as a counsellor and a therapist quite early on in my fertility journey, probably about a year or two into it. And that completely changed how I was as a mother, completely changed how I was as a person. And then I discovered mindset work. And again, it was a complete change. And that was just a complete life change. So there's been lots of different steps along the way. But I certainly feel now, pregnant now, I kind of go, oh, if I'd got pregnant back then, I don't think it would have been a good idea.
Yeah.
I can see why now I'm far more ready to take on this, this next chapter, I guess, of our lives. Because, I feel like a completely different person. I'm chilled.
Yeah.
If that's the way. Yeah. So, I completely agree with you that this journey takes us where we need to be, so that we can be the mothers.
I'm writing that down. That's really good.
Yeah.
Your next
so
book.
That we,
I'll quote you, right? So yours.
Yeah, you can quote me. Because becoming a mother is a real transition, isn't it? And I think we do need to kind of I don't know if appreciate's the right word, but be mindful of that, and that we need to be the best possible person for those children that are going to come through us.
Yeah. And what was your original career before you retrained?
So, I just did a lot of admin jobs. Yeah. It's really funny. I originally, my degree, I was very arty, a very creative person. And I did an art degree. So I did a photography degree. Really thought I was going to be a photographer, travel the world. But it didn't work out. And I was a bit like, what shall I do? So I ended up in a lot of office jobs. doing just kind of, you know, office work. And I ended up working in the city in London, in quite a good job. And it was in a completely different from what I do now. It's almost like hilarious when I think of it.
Yeah.
So it was like an exams department, and we would make exams for the insurance sector.
Oh, yeah.
And it was very businessy and very not like me.
Yeah.
Very straight-laced and very serious, and nobody really spoke that much. And I was just like, how did I end up here?
I know,
This
right?
is not where I'm meant to be. I don't know how I've got here. And so it was a little bit strange. And then, you know, making that change into doing like therapy and counselling, you know, everyone was like, okay, that's more like you.
Yeah. Yeah. There's real freedom
we get
in
that.
Work as well, isn't there? There's a lot more creative freedom and
a lot more.
This work that you're doing now, what triggered you to actually make that change? Do you remember a moment where you made that change?
Well, you know, it was quite a long journey. So the initial moment was just I was feeling very lost. So I was, you know, I had a young, I think my son was probably wasn't even 2 yet.
Oh, yeah.
I was starting to go through all the fertility stuff, and I was I was quite distressed actually. When I look back, I think I was quite lost and quite like, what am I going to do? I was in a job I didn't really like. And I went out to dinner with a very good friend who I'd studied with. And she just said to me, just very out of the blue, oh, you sound like my therapist. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And because I didn't know she had a therapist, but also it was one of those moments where you think, oh, and she said, you should do it. And I thought, oh, that's interesting. And she gave me the details of where her therapists are trained, and where her sister was also training to be a therapist, an art therapist. And there was something about the art and the therapy. And I thought, oh, I'm just going to go and check it out. And then I just thought, yes, this is me. I wasn't sure I entirely believed in it, but I went along, and I just needed something for me, I think, at that point. So it wasn't necessarily I was thinking about a career, but after about a year or two, I was like, no, this is it, you know. There's something about helping people and talking to people, and how much you get out of talking, because I had to be in personal therapy, and that was a bit of a shock.
Yeah, I know, right?
But how I crossed over into infertility was when I really, you know, because when you're going through infertility, it's not a good idea to practice helping, you know, people that you're so affected by.
Yeah.
But when I got to a point where I was like, actually, I'm okay with my life as it is. If it's just me, my husband and my son, I'm good. I'm really good. Yeah. And so I thought, you know what? It's infertility, and I can't deny it. I know that's where I'm going to help people. So that was about, you know, 2 years ago now that I made the switch to focus solely on infertility. And I'm so glad I did.
Lovely. And I think you said something really interesting there about the fact that you had to get to a place where you were comfortable with your life, because the amount of triggers that you would have if you weren't, I'm sure would have been hard to handle.
Yes, because I was, you know, back then I was triggered all the time by a lot of things, pregnant women, everything, you know. Yeah. And yeah, it was really difficult. But I always knew in the back of my mind I was going to eventually one day. Yeah. Because I knew that I knew there was, in my experience, even though I had my own therapist, she wasn't trained in infertility. She didn't specialise in infertility or anything. Mm-hmm. But I kept saying to her, there's no emotional support. Like, you know, I go for all these treatments, I go and speak to all these people. I've been through all these tests and procedures, but nobody's connecting the emotional support. And so I thought, if that's my experience, I'm not the only one. And so I knew in the back of my mind, even back then when I was training, I am gonna do this at some point. I am gonna work in this field, in this like kind of niche, for want of a better word, because nobody else is doing it.
No. You're absolutely right.
You know, and I knew that people weren't connecting those dots between, you know, the emotional distress, the mental health, and the treatment. And I was like, come on, like, you know, this is huge. There's a huge gap here. And so I just knew that that's where I would eventually go. But you're right, you know, you have to get to a point where you can do that. And so it took me a couple of years, but yeah, I got there.
We, myself and my husband, help facilitate at, there's an Irish group called NISIG, and they're amazing. We didn't find them till very late in our journey.
Right.
Which is a shame, because they are absolutely amazing. And because we felt so grateful to them for the support, I don't know if we would have carried on if we hadn't found them. I'm honest, I don't know if Sophie would be here. So we facilitate a bit. So I facilitated too early, and before I'd done any of my coaching journey, and I was just too happy at those meetings. Like I remember coming out of them going, you know, feeling a discomfort, going, I've done something wrong, but I'm not sure what I'm doing wrong. I think I was just so happy and in a great place that I just wasn't being sensitive enough or quiet enough, you know what I mean? Quiet internally. Yes. So I stepped back from them because I knew I was the wrong person to do them, and my husband is still facilitates. So I think it's so important that when we're trying to help people, we're in the best possible place with the best possible knowledge, because I mean, I don't think I probably harmed anybody, but I'm sure I was just too peppy for, you know, I'm a peppy person anyway, but you know, you got to learn, and the coaching has taught me a lot about how to be in the moment, and you know, how to manage my energy and be all about the client's energy and all that kind of thing. Where at the start it was all my energy, which is very big. So I think it's such an interesting area, and you're absolutely right. There's so little even now. And I was doing my fertility a long time ago. Sophie's 8, so I was another 6 years before that. And there was nothing. I luckily went to counselling at the start because I needed to.
Wow. But that's quite rare, isn't it? No one offered me anything. And like I said, it was just so happened that I was training to be a therapist and counsellor. And I had to be in weekly therapy as part of my training. So otherwise I wouldn't have connected the dots to get a counsellor. It wouldn't have come to my mind. And nobody else had said it to me during my treatment, but it just so happened that I was in therapy and getting some kind of emotional support. So for me it was like, it's not going to be the most obvious thing to do when you're going through fertility treatment, but how necessary it is.
I know, right?
You know,
because when you think about the themes that come up when you're faced with a diagnosis of infertility, you know, huge emotions, what is it, like shame? I know I felt like I was broken. There was something fundamentally wrong with me that I couldn't just do this. You know, and then it brings up all that other stuff that might be in your past and your background. There's so much stuff that we have to deal with.
Brings up so much stuff, doesn't it? Body image, you know, because you feel like you said, your body's broken. That self-image, you know, who am I if I don't have, you know, if I don't become a mother and I don't have the children that I thought I was going to have, and you know, shame, you know,
well, I'm a genealogist.
What's my family going to think about me, and all that kind of stuff.
And as I'm a genealogist. I was before I had a child. I don't have any time for that anymore. But, you know, I'd be doing all the family trees, and I'd see the parts of the family that, you know, didn't have children, and I was like, that's going to be that's going to be myself and Declan's family tree. It's just going to end here. And that was very, very deep for me. Very questioning your reason.
Well, and I kind of go into the book actually, because I felt like through therapy and through my understanding of you know, the different, you know, the different concepts in therapy, was that I was like, this is a huge existential crisis.
Yes.
And I feel like when you come into treatment, it's not necessarily seen as that way. It's kind of seen as, oh, you're a person, you're a woman, X age, who can't get pregnant, and we're just going to try and help you get pregnant. Yeah. And I think they miss the, like, what's really going on at that core of that person. Yeah. And I was like, this is huge. This is like a life crisis, like anything else, like, you know, and I don't want to be flippant and compare it to cancer, but there was something about, you know, this huge moment where you think, actually, who am I? And it really does question who you are. And then your legacy.
Yes, that's the word, legacy.
Yeah, and then if it's just me, what happens to me when I get older? And all these things come out. And I think we really need to understand it as more than just a woman who can't get pregnant. Because it's kind of trivializing it in a way, because actually internally, it is a massive breakdown. And you have to somehow in that journey rebuild yourself, and whether that's you become a mother or you end up living child free, there is a rebuilding of who you are and who you think you are, and it's huge.
And it's one of the best things that's ever happened to me, which is so weird, isn't it?
Yes, me too. I know. I think when you're in the thick of it, you think, how can anyone say that? How can anyone say it's the best thing that's ever happened to them? But I can honestly say now, and not just because I'm pregnant, but I would have said this, you know, back in January, I would have said this at the end of last year, that, you know, or in 2019, I would have said, you know, I'm so glad it happened to me. I'm so glad I went through this, because I would never have changed my life in the way that I have if I hadn't have gone through it. I just wouldn't have. Well, I might have changed it in a different way, but I wouldn't have changed it in this way. And so I feel like it was meant to happen. I was meant to go through that so that I could, you know, be here today helping other women, you know, having written a book about it. That wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have gone through it. So I can't say it wasn't a good thing.
No, I totally hear you. I agree completely. And again, I'm not saying it because I eventually had the kid, you know. I think the changes were happening in me before I finally got pregnant with her. And we had the plans for what we would do if we didn't have her. And they were great plans, where at the start, all the, what's going to happen? Am I going to end up in an old people's home? And who's going to pluck my chin?
These really important questions.
You know, but you know, like, it is, you worry about this loneliness, and there's this dark cloud ahead of you, and that's horrible. It's almost like depression, having this dark cloud in your future. And then we turned it to being a very, very positive, like, if we don't have the baby, here's what we're going to do. And it was great. And I remember somebody coming up to me in an ISIG meeting, but this was before I was a facilitator. I was I think I was still going. I think I was pregnant, but I was still going. I said, do you ever think about what you do if you didn't get pregnant? I was like, yeah. Like this list of things. And she was like, oh, it's like I'd slapped her, because she was like, oh my God, I've just always wanted to be a mother. I can't think of anything else. I was like, oh, sorry, God, that was very insensitive of me. But I had gotten to that point of, I have figured it out, and it's going to be cool.
Yeah, me too. I was like, right, I'm going to do this, and we're going to go and do that. We're going to buy this house. We're going to leave that to that one, and we're going to do that, and I'm just going to go and do all these things. And that was like, okay, that's fine. I can do that. Not a problem. And it started to be more about, and I think, you know, this is going to probably sound a little bit weird and a little bit morbid, but I too was like you, like I started to think about, you know, getting older and dying. And that was the moment that made me go, oh, wait, hold on. Because I started thinking, oh, who's going to be at my funeral? And it's going to be so terrible. There's going to be nobody there. And I was like, I won't care when I'm dead.
I know.
I'm not going to care if no one's at the funeral. I'm dead, like who's gonna care? And then I started to backtrack and thought, so maybe if it's not about that, maybe it's about the way I lived, because then that's what I'm going to experience. And then do I want to experience this dark depression and for the rest of my life, or do I want to just live it and have it be about, oh, I did this and I did that and I met these kinds of people and had these kinds of experiences, so that when I get to the end of my life, I'm like, do you know what? It wasn't quite bad.
Exactly. Get busy living or get busy dying. Isn't that what the saying is?
That's the saying, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And tell me about...
Yeah, go ahead.
I was going to
say.
There's so much to say.
So much to say.
No, please tell me what you were saying.
No, I was just going to say that actually when you're in the thick of infertility, you're getting busy dying.
Yeah. Everything's paused.
Everything's paused.
Everything's paused.
Yeah.
And tell me about then belonging. How did you cope with the whole belonging, and even pre-fertility? Have you always felt like you belonged, or has that been a journey for you as well?
It's been a weird journey. So when I was at school, I felt like I belonged. I found a little group of friends that they were like sisters, because I don't have any sisters. I have an older brother, and I have a younger half brother, and I've always wanted sisters. And so they were like my sisters. And then I started working, as you do, part-time, and I met some really good friends who are still my friends today. But it's funny, once I left school, I found belonging quite difficult. I found it harder. And I think when I ended up working in different places that I didn't like, I was really reminded that these aren't my people, and how am I here, and what am I doing, and just having no real connection. And one of the beauties of my training, my art therapy training, and I always say it was a group of females. I think there were 20 of us on my course. It was all women, and I did it every other week for 2 years with these women. And I remember the day I left, I was so sad to leave that course. So I felt like those women brought me back to life.
That's a lovely way to put it.
Yeah, because I was struggling so much with infertility, struggling so much with being a mother. Everything was just so, and these women just held me and supported me through that. And it was just the most incredible and beautiful experience. And again, it dies away, doesn't it, when you leave that workplace or that training or whatever it is. But since then, I think belonging, again, it's like, oh, okay, I'm still looking for my tribe. And I think I found it again now in a very weird way on social media.
Funny, isn't it?
But I connect with many people who are doing amazing jobs in the fertility space. And I do feel like, in a weird way, at first I thought, oh, I don't know if I belong here, because there's no one who's like me, who does the work that I do. And I wasn't sure. But then I started to think, no, I am part of this. I've been through this. I know, And since then, I've just had so many people come my way, and I've had so many amazing connections and conversations with people. But it's all virtual. And
I know, right?
It's a little bit strange, but I do feel like I'm finding my tribe again.
Yeah. I think Instagram is great for that, because I'm not setting up Steph B. I wasn't huge in social media, just a little bit privately. I can't believe the chat and the crack I have in the messengers behind the scenes, just everything from people who are struggling with work, because my social media is a little bit about because I'm HR, I'm big into kind of workplace success as a professional, and kind of how to get out of your own way as a professional. And then obviously I do a bit on the fertility support as well. And I just can't believe the stuff that goes on in the DMs. It's so cool. Like, so many great people.
So many great people. And so many great people that want to help other people. And so these amazing connections and conversations and like-mindedness,
Yes.
which is really heartwarming and grounding. And I love it, you know. Sometimes I can be a bit too much on my phone.
I'm the same. I struggle. The balance is hard, isn't it?
The balance is hard.
Yeah.
But there's always someone in my DMs and I'm answering, and I'm trying not to be on there in the evenings.
Yeah.
But someone always pops into my DMs of an evening and I'm like chatting away. But there is and that's what's, again, strange probably about 2020. And I think for a lot of people, that kind of connection has been apologize.
I can still hear you. It's all good.
All right. So that connection has been disrupted for many people. And yet I found more connection through doing this kind of work. So it's funny what you open yourself up to when you don't have the normal ways of working. Yeah.
Also, I think when you're brave enough, you know, you put yourself out there. And I think when you're brave enough to put yourself out there, it's very attractive to people who need something, void and need something filled, you know, and the way you do it is so, you know, it's so likable. It's so easy to watch your social media. So I think that's great too, that you have a way of I suppose engaging with people, you know.
Yeah, it took me a while though to find that and to find my voice and find, you know, a comfortableness with, or whatever the word is, to kind of do that. And I feel like that's kind of really evolved over this year. At the beginning of this year, I was a bit like, I'm not sure. And it just so happened to coincide with lockdown that I was like, I'm going to get serious about this. And really like make this work and really put my all and my energy here. And I was so glad that I did, because, and it does take, you know, a bit of commitment, a bit of consistency. And I'm so glad that actually I noticed, it's not part of my training, you know, being a counsellor, being a therapist, you're meant to be pretty much, you know, a blank screen. But there was something, and around about March, I was like, that's not going to work here. It's not going to work on social media. You know, people want to know who you are, what you're about. And so I was like, oh, this is a little bit uncomfortable because I'm not sure, you know, this might be frowned upon. But I'm going to do it. I'm going to just do it. And actually, people have come and gravitated towards me. And the women I work with all say, I'm working with you because I know you get it and I know you understand. And I was like, okay. Yeah. So we connect by sharing who we are. And and social media is a great place for that.
When you think about it as well, when people are reading your book, it's nice to have your face and your tone of voice. You know, when I'm reading a book, I like to hear the author in it. So I think it's lovely that people who are reading your book get to you and know who you are and know your personality. So I think it adds flavor, doesn't it?
Yeah, but it was still a little bit like, oh, I'm putting myself out here a bit. It's a little bit uncomfortable. But again, I started writing it in January, and I was like, I have to share who I am. It can't just be, this is what I did and then what I did, and then, you know, it can't be stiff. People want to know, and they want to connect to that and know that you understand. And I feel actually when you're sharing your story, it's not just, oh, I did this and then I did that. There was so much more to it, because you're a person, you're a human being. And so it was a real process for me, and to really dig that a little bit deeper and go, okay, I am gonna share. And the comments I've had and the messages I've had from women saying, oh, your book, you know, I opened it up and, you know, I can't believe it, the way you describe it. It's exactly the way I feel. And you know, it's exactly what I need. And I was just like, wow, hoped that people would say this, but I didn't. You can never know. And so for me now, it's just like, wow, that's amazing. It's incredible.
It's amazing to have that resource there, because again, I'm going back quite a few years, but I don't remember seeing, and I'm a reader. So if I have a problem, I'm a researcher.
Yeah.
I will find a book, I will find a resource, I will find an expert. And Instagram made that so much easier. Back in the old days, I just had to go on to those what were they called? Those boards. I hated those boards. Remember the boards?
I know what you mean. Yeah,
very
I never went on them.
depressing places. You were constantly looking for the solution, constantly thinking there's just a solution out there, and if I find it, that's it, I'll get pregnant. And I thought the boards would be a place I might find it. So every so often I go into the whole, rabbit hole of the boards, and I'd be like, why am I on here? I can't, there's all this comparison going on, and so many sad stories, and but there was nowhere else to find stuff. And I don't remember there being any books available. So do you know, are there many others like you writing books about IVF?
Well, mine's not about IVF, actually. Well, it does talk about IVF, but I didn't do IVF. And I talk about why I didn't. And things like that. Well, what I found was there were either books talking about IVF, which I didn't do, so it wasn't relevant to me. Or there were books about people's successful stories. And I was like, I'm not there. And I don't really want to buy a book that talks to me about your journey to a successful pregnancy. It just wasn't connecting. And so for me, there were no resources, and so it was just like Google or Facebook. I mean, you had boards, I had Facebook groups that I found incredibly depressing, and I just had to come off all of them. So I didn't have any good resource. And so when I sat down to write my book, I was like, okay, what's the point? Why am I writing this? And I was like, well, what aren't people talking about in the books that are available? And I know there are some great books out there, like Starts with the Egg and Period Power and those kind of things. I was like, nobody's talking about the mental health or the mindset. And that's what I've discovered that really helped me. And although at the point of writing the book, I wasn't pregnant and I was still technically in the thick of infertility, I was like, but I feel okay about it. I feel okay about my life. I found these things that have really helped me. I think they could help someone else. So the book isn't about IVF in particular. It does touch on IVF. It's really about the emotional side of infertility that I just didn't find anywhere, and how to manage the distress and to recognize that actually it's a part of the process, and recognize when you really do need support. But also it gives you the tools as well, the mindset tools to help you manage. So there's lots of journaling in the book. There's lots of journaling prompts and things like that, and lots of practices that the reader can do, because I felt like it needed to be something that that the reader could go on a journey with too and come back to again and again, rather than just being like, this is how you get pregnant. Because you can go on Google and find all of that stuff. And I wanted this to be just a little bit different and really talk about the bit that nobody's talking about. This is about you. And so that's what I hope the book does.
Where can people get the book?
So you can get it on Amazon. It's
Awesome.
available on Amazon UK, and it's available in paperback and Kindle. So you can get it either way.
Awesome.
And you can also, it's probably any online book retailer. So
really accessible.
Really accessible. Yeah.
So if you could go back to yourself pre this journey, is there a message you would give yourself?
Oh my gosh. What would I give myself? Keep going. keep going, you're on the right track. It's going to be painful. There are going to be painful moments, but you'll find your way.
It'll be worth it.
And it will be worth it.
Yeah.
In ways that you can't imagine.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's brilliant. So social media, you've gotten a lot from it this year. Is there anything you don't like about it? What do you have to manage in the whole social media, that murky world?
Oh, this might be controversial.
I love controversial. Go for it.
I'm mixed with social media. At first it was a real minefield for me of like not being too anxious about it, so not being too reliant on the clicks and the likes and the hearts and all that kind of stuff. And so I had to really work on my mindset around that. But I think once I got past that, I mean, now what I don't like about it is, I mean, it's probably the same what I feel about the Facebook groups, in that the fertility community on there is absolutely amazing, so supportive, but there is a real sense of it's a bit like it's like sheep, isn't it? Everyone thinks the same, everyone talks about it the same. So it's all doom and gloom and this is terrible until you get your big fat positive. And I struggle with that, because I feel like that's one of the things that, when I was in the thick of my fertility struggles, it just brought me more down. And I think people don't realise the impact of taking in those messages. Infertility is terrible, it's the worst thing. And it's like, if you keep reading that and you keep seeing that, then it really is that,
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Yeah.
And
your brain believes what you tell it.
The brain believes what you tell it. And and when you tell it that, you look for things to reaffirm that. So you'll go on social media and you'll look for those accounts and those posts that reaffirm how terrible it is and this is awful. And misery loves company, right?
Yes, yeah.
So there's never a truer saying when it comes to infertility. I was just like, this is just awful,
Yeah.
So I came off of all of them when I was in the thick of it, because I knew it wasn't good for my mental health. And so I struggle with the balance of being a part of a community that I think is really supportive and really necessary, because there's so much great information that is coming through social media that wasn't there, 5 years ago. But I also struggle with the fact that, it's that kind of, it can be quite toxic.
Yeah.
And it's kind of pretending that it's not toxic.
Yes. Yeah.
But actually it is.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm totally
yeah. So that's my bugbear with social media.
I think we've got to be aware that our primitive brain is just so easily swayed and can be so easily brought down that tunnel of doom if we let it. And it's about I really believe in curating what goes into my head. That's something I learned during my fertility struggles, was that my fertility struggles were like a representation of my general struggles in life, how I felt about myself. Generally, it was like a magnifying glass, actually, on everything else that I need to fix.
Exactly. And that's exactly the work, and that's exactly how I feel it is as well. And exactly the work that I do with my clients is that actually it's just magnifying what's wrong in your whole entire life.
Yes.
And I find that fascinating, and other people are a bit like, oh my God, I just want it to go away.
Yeah. But I do think if you go at these things with curiosity, like you say, fascinating, right? Once I got curious about it and curious about the journey, why is my phone actually singing to me? I don't understand, because it's on silent. That's very strange. Okay. I just started playing music.
It was such an important moment. That's why right? It needs music in this moment.
Why? It's on. It's really weird. It's on silent. But yeah, I found when I got curious, the journey changed altogether. I'm just going to throw my phone far away there, because I don't know why it's making that noise. Once I got curious, that was it. Things changed for me hugely. And it was an amazing moment in the journey.
Yeah, and I think you're right. When you get curious about yourself, and what's going on for me, and why am I feeling all of these things? Not judging it. So I always say to people, don't judge it. Don't judge the fact that you're feeling all these things. But just get curious about why. What's coming up? What's happening here? Why am I going through this? Just ask yourself and just be really interested in the answer. And the more you do that, the more you go, okay. And it's just a journey. And I still do it every day. I still go through things and anxieties, and it's the same process. It's just a different issue.
But isn't it interesting what we learn? I'm going to ask you something about this phone. Isn't it interesting what we learn about I find like generally my resilience is in a different space than it ever was, and generally I don't believe in thinking positive, but I do believe in that baseline of positivity, that it's the baseline of positivity and the baseline of resilience for me rose as I did all the work. So the work you're doing on the fertility stuff, you can just apply to everything.
Yeah, and that's what I loved. And I think one of the reasons I wrote the book was when I discovered mindset work, not for my fertility, it was to start my counselling practice. And when I came into it, I was like, I could use this for my fertility. And I started to apply it. And I was like, why do we just think of mindset and positive mindset and this growth mindset in terms of business? Why don't we just apply it to fertility? It's like the same thing. Why don't we apply it to our health and our well-being? Because it's all there. And I'm like you, I don't necessarily believe in a positivity, like that positivity mindset, because I think what people get misconstrued is, I have to be positive all the time, and and I don't want to do that, and that's too hard, and it's not realistic. No, it's not realistic, but you're missing the point. It's not about the positive mindset. It's about recognizing when I'm in a negative mindset. And do I want to stay there? That's all a positive mindset is. It's like, okay, I'm going into a negative mindset here. Oh, what's happening? And again, it's getting curious. Why am I doing that? What's happening for me? What's making me anxious? And then the more I look at that and reflect on that, I go, okay, I can change it. I can go to a positive mindset. But I can't be in a positive mindset if I don't recognize why I'm in a negative mindset.
And what are my options?
And what are my options? And so it takes a bit of work, and I think a lot of people don't want to do that. I'm really fascinated that quite a lot of people don't want to do the self-work because it's hard.
It is hard.
And
but it's also free, and it's also there. Of course, if we need coaches, counsellors, of course it's a little bit of money. But what I always find interesting, because I've been getting counselling since I was in my early 20s, here and there when I needed it, and coaching here and there when I need it, we'll spend more on a night out than we will on investing on ourselves for making and the leaps I saw in myself when I was getting counselling and coaching, and the leaps I now see in others, those gear changes, oh my God, I get so excited when I see them. It's not that expensive. You think about the radical changes we're making for ourselves forever, and the lessons we're learning forever. And it's the same as somebody spend on a handbag or a night out or whatever. I just find that fascinating as well. And I like to delve into that. What's stopping you? Like, what is it? What's the? Are you actually okay with your life? You're just like moaning about it. Like, what is it? Like, what is the source of your lack of what's the word I'm looking for? Motivation, maybe to make the changes that you say you want.
Yes. And isn't that the interesting part, isn't it? And that's the curious part that I always get to, because people go, well, I don't see how this is going to help. I think what we're used to in this society that we're now in is, you've got Google at your fingertips, you've got Alexa, we've got all these quick fixes. And so people are like, well, I don't really want to do that. I don't really see the point in that. If you've got a hack for my fertility, if you've got a diet and it might work, then I'll just do that. And it's like, at some point, you're going to have to go and do that self-work. It's always going to be there, and you can do it
right.
now, or you can wait. And so I'm always curious about why we don't invest in ourselves, and is it like we don't feel worthy, or you know, what is it? But I've been a person who's always invested in myself. So, you know, I went and retrained, you know, when I was in my early 30s with a toddler. No one else was doing that. People thought I was crazy. I left a job to retrain and really focus. People again thought I was crazy. But you invest in yourself, you know, you kind of go, I'm going to do that course. Whereas I met a lot of people along the way, you know, a lot of friends who aren't friends anymore, who were like, oh no, I could, but no. And I was just like, why not? You know, go do it. You know, it's not too late. Oh no, but I'm nearly 40. Why would I want to retrain now? And you're like, what's stopping you?
I know, you and I are so alike. I'm like, well, you're going to live till you're 80, mate. Like, you've got like half your life back.
You've got half of your life. Like, just go and do it. You know, you won't regret it. And I think people just feel like it's okay. It's not that bad.
Yeah.
And so I'll just stay where I am. I'm comfortable. And I think it's changed. We don't want to be changed. And even though we hate things the way they are, the thought of changing, because then everything else around me has to change. And I think that's what people are resistant to. Like, well, then my friends have got to change. And then, you know, other things in my life, you know, might have to change. You know, my marriage might not work out. And it's like, well, maybe there's a problem in your marriage anyway. It might not work out anyway.
But you'll have a job you love, and you'll have a job divorced. I mean, you know.
Yeah, exactly. You know, we're hiding from ourselves. We're hiding from our truth. And I think, people are just like, no, it's fine. I hate it. I hate where I am, but it's okay. It's like,
I heard this thing one time, and it makes so much sense to me, because again, I'm like you. I'm like, why don't? But if you, and that's what somebody said to me years ago, that I couldn't be a counsellor and I'd have to be a coach, because I'm really like, why don't you just do that? I'm terrible for that. Like, somebody comes to me moaning, I'm like, well, there's a clear solution. Why aren't you doing it? So I had to unlearn that as well for coaching. Apparently, coaches aren't allowed to do that either. But I heard this concept that if you put all your problems in a pile on your front lawn, your front garden, and everybody else does the same, and your street, and you all look at each other's problems, and you go, I'm going to hang on to mine, thanks. I like my problems. I'm comfortable with them. I know them. You keep yours, I'll keep mine. Let's not swap the problems.
Yeah. And we are comfortable with our problems. I think we get comfortable in our lives. And some people are, you know, completely happy, and that's okay, fine, you know. But for me, that was never going to be like my life, just being happy, being miserable. Like, I was like, no, this can't be it. There's got to be more to this. And so I think there are people who look at their problems and go and get to a point and think, oh, fuck this. And I was a bit like that. Oh, fuck this. I can't continue this way. Like, this is no way to live. And you do something about it, and you might not solve it all, you know, straight away. And some of it you might end up trying to solve for the rest of your life. But I'd rather try and solve it than just kind of have it there niggling away in the background. Because it's heavy. That stuff just kind of eats away at you.
I like that. It is heavy. That's a lovely word. I also think these problems bite you in the arse regularly.
Of course.
Do you know what I mean? Every time there's a crisis, that same thought process or that same thing you're carrying is going to bite you again and again and again. And then you'll put it away for a few months, and it'll bite you again. That was certainly my experience when I wasn't fixing the fundamental stuff. That it would just come out and
and totally. And, you know, I learned that during, you know, therapy and stuff, is that sometimes we come back to it and we deal with it quicker because we've dealt with it. Well, we've dealt with most of it. But a lot of the times it does keep coming back, and it comes back in different disguises and different was. So it's just recognizing that. So when I was younger, it's only this year, a couple of months ago, I was standing in my kitchen and thought, actually I've always been an anxious person. I just never labelled it that way because nobody else in my family or friendship group would have labelled it that way. But actually, I'm quite an anxious person about certain things, and it shows up. And even I was driving down to London this morning, and I could feel that I was getting quite anxious. Like, I'm going to be late. I'm going to be late for this interview. Yeah. I had to really work to calm myself down, and so it's just recognizing your little patterns. Yeah. And like, what do I need? Whereas, throw back, 2-3 years ago, I would have been anxious the whole way here, like fretting with the traffic or whatever, and then had a really bad day.
Yeah.
Whereas now I'm like, oh, okay, I know what I'm doing. I know what's going on. Stop it.
Yeah.
But it's like the more you recognize it, even if you don't like it, the more you start to recognize, oh, this is my thing. This is, here we go again. Yeah. Here it is again. You just get that little bit quicker. And that's what I always say to my clients. Like, the whole idea is that instead of spending months feeling depressed and low and anxious, we get it down to 4 weeks. Yeah. And then we get it down to a week. Yeah. And then we get it down to a couple of days. Yeah. And then we're getting to a point where you never know, we might be good enough and we might catch it in a couple of hours.
Yeah.
It's not to say it's always going to be like that, but we just want to limit, we want to shorten the time that we're spending in that kind of fight or flight. Yeah. We don't want to be in it for weeks. We want to be in it for days, and maybe not even days, a day at the most. Yeah. We just want to shorten the time that you're in that kind of distress. Yeah. And that's the work. That's the beauty of it.
I love that. I think as well, and tell me if you found this through doing your work and your work with your clients. One thing I didn't do pre my fertility struggle was I always sound American when I say this, feel my feelings. I just didn't. I used to just I was a kid that wouldn't and couldn't cry. Like I just didn't know how to process feelings. And my God, did I have to learn how to do that through my fertility struggle. And now, like you say, I love what you said there, because I used to go down into these, pits of anxiety and depression for quite a long time. And then as I learned how to, I had a miscarriage. I'll give you an example. I had a miscarriage at the start of my fertility struggles. Didn't tell a soul how much it got to me. Didn't even tell my husband, my mother. I didn't tell a soul. And eventually I had to go to a counsellor because I was at the point of getting panic attacks and huge anxiety issues. And he said, so tell me about your coping mechanisms. And I was like, what are they? He went, like, who do you talk to? I was like, well, I'm here to talk to you. He's like, okay. So, and I said, I just want to be like normal people. And he was like, well, normal people have a thing called coping mechanisms. And I was like, tell me about them. I don't know what they are. Like, I had no idea what they were. And I was like really embarrassed about going. I went into a bookshop to buy a Louise L. Hay book. She was my first ever self-development book. Loved it because it spoke to me. Like, it really spoke to me. But I remember going into the bookshop 2-3 times and kind of circling around that area and being too embarrassed to pick it up and go to the till, because I was like, normal people don't need this kind of thing. And he said to me, normal people, that's what they do.
That's what they do. They find ways. Yeah.
It was like eye-opening for me. It was eye-opening, seriously. Like,
yeah. And I think, do you know what it is? I think we grow up not necessarily, and it's through no fault of anyone, no one in our families or anything, but we grow up and we're not really told what to do with our feelings. Like, we learn from young, and I saw myself doing it with my own son when he was young, that not really managing his tantrums, and that was a real big point for me in my therapy. Was like, why is it when he has a tantrum, it brings up all of this stuff for me? I mean, it was awful. It brought up so much stuff for me. And my therapist was like, well, what do you do with your anger? And I was like, oh.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm not very, I didn't express it. And I realised that actually I held quite a lot of my emotions in. I held quite a lot of, especially if I thought that if I got angry, I wouldn't necessarily express it. If I was really upset, I could talk about that more, but it was my anger that I wasn't talking about. Yeah. My husband's really good with his anger. I'm envious of the way he deals with his anger. he's able to tell you very directly, like,
Okay.
oh. Yeah. And whereas I'm just like, oh my God, how do you do that?
Yeah.
You know, and I had to start to learn how to express, because I was so fearful that if I said, like, you've just made me mad, that it would just cause an argument, that I just didn't want the confrontation, so I wouldn't have it. But when my son had tantrums, because children are so in their feelings and they're so in the moment, it just brought up so much stuff for me. And I was just, you know, we went through like 2 years of hell, because I was just like, I can't handle his tantrums.
Yeah.
And having to learn that actually it was my stuff. It was my you know, thing that was going on. And so I had to really work through that. And so, yeah, infertility and fertility treatment really brought that up for me. Like, you know, you have to deal and sit with your feelings. You can't hide from it. You've got to like really go, okay, what's going on here? And kind of get into it. And so it's been life-changing for me. And I'm still, you know, I still get angry. And I still, you know, don't deal with it in the best of ways. But I'm so much better than I was. And it's all just, yeah, I love it. I'm fascinated by all of these things, because you start to see, like you said, people change and start to be able to express themselves and talk about their hurts and talk about their anger, and then feel this real lightness, like, oh, I feel so much better. I'm like, yeah, isn't it incredible?
Amazing, isn't it?
You know?
It's amazing how much joy we can feel when we learn to deal with the other stuff, because I felt before I learned all this stuff, the joy wasn't there either. And the joy that I feel day in, day out, I just think I'm lucky actually to have gone on this journey.
Yeah, because you know what happens with what we do is when we're trying so hard to suppress all of our feelings, well, those negative feelings, those big feelings that we don't want to feel, the sadness, the anger, the frustration, all those kind of things. When we're trying so hard to suppress that, we end up suppressing our joy, because you can't experience one without the other, right? And so once you start to work on these things, then you suddenly go, oh, I feel so good. And you can let joy in, because it's okay. I can deal with those things. Which means I can experience that too,
isn't it? Like,
it
joy
is
a big emotion.
I think joy is the exact same feeling as like anger, and the brain and the body, the physiology in the body feels it in the exact same way, because it's quite a heightened emotion, and so a lot of people can't go into joy. So I've done lots of counselling, especially when I worked in addiction. A lot of people couldn't go into joy, and they couldn't go into, you know, all the other stuff, and it was so interesting, because it's a heightened emotion. They just didn't know, like, oh, it feels too much, or they couldn't identify emotions. They just had, like, oh, I don't know how I feel. That's another common one. I don't know how I feel, because we're just not in tune with what's going on in our bodies.
I could talk to you about this all day, like all day, but we're coming up, I think, to over an hour. So my last question for you today is, I'm uploading this one and another lovely lady about fertility as well, pre-Christmas, because I think Christmas can be a really tough time for people who are struggling. So if you had one thing to say to somebody who's facing into Christmas, what would you say?
I would say, look after yourself, be kind to yourself, give yourself lots of compassion, and do the things that, you know, put yourself first and protect yourself, because, like you said, it's a really difficult time. And I think we're not used to doing that, especially at Christmas, because we do for everybody else. But finding that time and space to put yourself first and give yourself what you need.
Awesome. Thank you. Listen, it's been a delight talking to you today. Like I say, I could talk
great.
for hours.
Yes, I know.
Thank you so much for joining me, Kezia. And listen, best of luck with everything.
Yes, thank you so much. Yes. Thank you.
And yeah, thank you very much for joining me.
Great. Thank you,
Have a great
Stephanie.
day.
Yeah, thank you.